Next, we're going to install the pneumatic hammer and put the hammer weight or head onto the cylinder. What we're going to have you do here first is make sure that the assembly fits into the gun. Go ahead and screw this hammer head onto the shaft here. Place it in the gun. You're going to take your linkage rod and front bolt and connect that to the hammer. You just want to make sure that wherever you did screw this into, in its back idle position, that the front bolt is either flush with the power tube or behind it. Behind is a little better. After that, you're going to take your 3/32 Allen wrench and tighten the set screw up to lock the hammer to the shaft. Next, we're going to take the 1032 barb fitting, put a little Loctite on the outside of the threads, screw that into your LPR or your low pressure regulator. Next, we're going to be installing the electronic board, battery holder, and electro-pneumatic valve. But before we do that, I'm going to go over the firing modes and the adjustments here and how they work while it's a little easier to see. The upper pot adjustment here is your rate of fire, up to 13 rounds per second. The bottom pot is your dwell time, and the dwell time is how long you're telling the pneumatic hammer to go in the forward position before returning. These three switches here are your dip switches that are going to tell the gun what firing mode that you're in. If you look right next to it, you have 6, that stands for 6-shot burst, 3 for 3-shot burst, T for turbo, F for full auto, R for auto response, and S for semi. So with all three of these switches in the down position, as it shows here next to semi, you'll be in semi. Auto response is the number 3 switch up and the first 2 down, and so on through the different modes. We're going to go ahead and place this in the gun. The way that you'll do this is place this over the sear guide and sear pivot pins. Your valve will go in this position, and your battery holder right next to the valve. Next 2 things we're going to be doing is installing the trigger. All you do is put that back over the same pins, move the switch out of the way, and drop it down. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to install the hose. Start by sliding this over the barb fitting on the pneumatic hammer and pushing it all the way to the base of the fitting. Lay this right over the top of the electronics in the valve. And go ahead and cut it to size about at the base of the fitting. And use long nose pliers again. Slide that over the fitting. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to put our 2 nuts in the bottom of the gun. I'm going to use your stock screw there on the back hole. Go ahead and get it started. Don't tighten it down all the way though. Next, you're going to take your air screw, start it into the first hole. You may need to compress the bottom line against the gun to get it started. Next, we're going to hook the hose from the air screw to the valve. You can use your long nose pliers to... Now that you have the gas line installed from the air screw to the pneumatic valve, I want to show you of a possible problem. You see how they are now connected by the hose? You'll want to make sure that the gas screw is as tight as you can get it without binding the nut. Otherwise, when you go to tighten this later, you can twist this hose and bind it up and cut off your air supply to your valve. So you want to make sure that it's about finger tight so where there's no play in it before connecting the hose. Next we're going to install the batteries. You'll do this with the positive to negative, positive to negative. So we're going to place the negative side on the spring, the negative side of this battery to the positive side of the battery below it. That's going to be our power supply. You'll want to make sure that this wire is running on the inside line here so you don't risk pinching it in the edge of the grip. After the batteries are installed, we'll want to make sure everything's working properly. First, you'll want to have all dip switches down in the semi-auto mode. Pull the trigger and you'll hear the click of the valve firing. Next, you'll want to put it in the full auto mode, which is the center switch up and 1 and 3 down. Everything's working properly. We'll go ahead and progress with our installation. Next, you'll want to reinstall your front sight spring, pin, and front sight, your ball detent. Now we're going to cut our piece of foam weather stripping here. And this will fit right on top of this board behind the trigger. So you'll want to cut that to size. Once you have it cut to size, go ahead and place it right on top of the board in this area. Make sure that the trigger isn't obstructed by it. Next, we're going to replace the left side of the body. As you notice here, we machined an opening here over the controls of the board. It's something you can do with a Dremel tool, or you can contact your local paintball store and ask them if they can machine that for you. That's going to give you a lot better access. It's not required, but it will make your job a lot easier when you go through your adjustments and that type of thing. After you get the right half on the left half, go ahead and replace your body screws. Your front grip, and go ahead and tighten those down. Next, you're going to go ahead and tighten down the back screw of your bottom line. You should be able to tighten the air screw with no more than about a half a turn. Now you're going to go ahead and hook the gas line up between the two bar fittings on the bottom of the gun now. You want to make sure that you run a decent sized loop so the hose doesn't kink.